All right, let's get started. Thanks for tuning in to our wellness webinar, where I'm going to basically share our story, and I'm going to keep it a little real, maybe a little raw. I'm going to just be totally honest with you of what we did, how we utilized the LifeVantage products to help our son. Now, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Marco Rodriguez, along with my lovely wife Diane. We own Transformations Rehab and Outpatient Rehab Facility located in El Paso, Texas, offering physical therapy, occupational therapy, and speech therapy services as well. And Diane and I have been in private practice now for well over 10 years. We've been in health professionals for over 25 years. I've actually been 31 years. And Diane used to work for the Isleta School District. I worked for the Sierra Providence Health Network. And I say this all the time. We were very happy with our jobs and thought that's what we do for the rest of our life. But how many of you know that there are times when life will hand you unexpected surprises? And for us, that came in the form of our son, Patrick. I'm going to share his story and what we did to help him, as well as what we've done to help some of our patients. Now, one thing I wanted to just say real quick is that nothing that I say today should be intended to mean that this is for the purpose of treating, curing, or mitigating any disease. We're going to follow FDA guidelines, and all I'm going to do is just share my story. All right, hopefully that makes sense, and if it resonates with you, great, and if it doesn't, that's okay too. If you have questions afterwards, please get back with the person who invited you to watch this video, and we'll be happy to meet with them and answer any questions that they might have. All right, so here we go. There he is. All right, so this is my son, Patrick. Very early in his life, he was diagnosed with multiple neurologic atypicalities. I say it that way because they could never quite figure out what exactly was going on with him. We heard things like ADD, ADHD, autism spectrum disorder, Asperger's, which of course is on the spectrum. So we did what any good parent would do. We took him to the experts, OT, speech, behavioral stuff, and it seemed like we tried every medication possible. The problem is that Patrick's system is very sensitive, so it seemed like if there was a side effect, Patrick got it. And every time we'd go back to the physicians, they could never quite figure out whether to increase the dose or decrease the dose or combine medications or change the medication altogether. So I became very frustrated because reading over the research, I saw what happens to a lot of these kids once they become adults. And I started looking up things like, for example, only 5% of autistic adults are living independently. Only 5%. 87% of them live at home. Many of them live in communities where they just have people to help them and everything. But only look at this: 85% of autistic adults are unemployed. 85%. So they're unable to hold a job. They're unable to live independently. Many of them, once they become adults, their insurance does not pay for this medication. That usually a lot of these kids are on medications, and eventually insurances say, no, that's it. We're not paying for medications anymore. So these kids start to look for ways of self-medicating. They become addicted to different kinds of drugs. For example, cocaine is very prevalent in this population. So when all of that happens, imagine what happens to your child or to any of these kids when the parents pass away. This is something that would keep me up at night. What's going to happen to my son once I'm no longer around? And I talk to a lot of parents and they feel the same way. So a lot of these kids end up homeless, and there's a big correlation, a high correlation with the homeless population and persons who have mental health disorders, as well as with autism. So I decided to become unreasonable. And I say it that way because that's one of the physicians that I was talking to. He said that I was being unreasonable in my expectations. And I said, you know what? You bet I am. This is my son, and I'm going to do whatever I can to help him. So I started doing my research. Now, I love going into PubMed.gov. I don't do my research in Google because you can find anything, blogs, opinions in Google. But in PubMed, you know that it's real, peer-reviewed studies. It's the real deal. So I started doing the research, and I started noticing that there's over 69,000 studies just on the subject of autism. 69,000. So when somebody tells you that we don't know anything about autism, they haven't read the research, obviously, because it's all there. And as I started reading it, I started noticing that there were certain terms that kept coming up. For example, mitochondrial dysfunction, oxidative stress, all of these terms. And so over time, these terms kept repeating themselves. And so I started writing them down. And I created what's called the common biomarkers. Now, this is certainly not the end-all, be-all. I'm sure there's other things out there that I haven't come across yet. This was just my list. my thought was, if this is a list that's affecting this population and I could do something to address each one of these, it may not cure anything. Again, we're not talking about a treatment, cure, mitigating anything, but it certainly would have some positive impacts on his body and his brain. So I'm going to share with you a video of Dr. Doherty, and she explains a lot of what happens inside of these kids' bodies and with all the biomarkers.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to explain some fairly complex biochemistry. I'm going to use some visuals just to show how important it is that certain cycles within your child's body are working well, and how everything's all connected. So this is the folate wheel. This cycle produces all the cells in the body. So 40 to 70% of children with a diagnosis have a problem with this pink wheel, the way that the folate cycle is spinning. Right next to the folate wheel is the methylation cycle. And the easiest way to understand methylation is to know that when babies are conceived, they're not methylated. And they grow through the process of methylation. So this cycle shows 90% impairment in children with a diagnosis. Together, these two cycles work to create a battery in the brain. So this battery is called glutathione. In kids with autism, this battery is up to 80% depleted and is the rate-limiting step to development. So essentially, your child's brain can only develop as far as glutathione can take it. Glutathione is depleted by things like lead, mercury, aluminum, cadmium, things like bisphenol A. This battery plays a crucial role in managing brain chemicals within the brain. So neurotransmitters govern everything from language to social development to sensory processing to cognitive function. So if these cycles aren't working smoothly, we're going to get disruptions in the balance in the brain. So what happens when there's not enough glutathione is you end up having way too much glutamate. Now, glutamate is the most plentiful neurotransmitter in the brain, but it has to be strictly managed. When the brain has too much glutamate, it starts to get really excited. Glutathione should be able to help you manage that excitability, but if it can't, that excitability can get to a toxic point. It can actually get so high that it creates damage within the brain. So this is what we see for kids with autism. When glutamate's too high, we all do this actually. We'll have spikes in glutamate during the day, and we manage it through repetitive behaviors, right? You forget your passport or your wallet, you're stressed out about something, and you pace back and forth. This is a form of repetitive behavior that's aimed at managing glutamate in the brain. The problem with autism is that the glutamate is so high all the time that kids and adults get locked in this repetitive world. They're very fixated, they're very routine, they're very rigid, and they're very obsessive. So most of what we do with biomedical treatment is improving these cycles. It's important from a quality of life standpoint because having that much glutamate is uncomfortable. It also opens doors to social language and cognitive skills that may be locked down because the glutamate is too high. So the methylation cycle governs about 200 different things within the body. It takes synthetic folic acid or folate from the diet, and it converts it into methylfolate. So essentially methylfolate is like gold for the brain. This methyl donor travels over here and it donates itself to 200 different enzymatic and biochemical reactions within the body. Most of them are essential for development. One of the most important ones I want to touch on is the way that the cell membrane functions. Cell membranes are really, really crucial to autism. We know that when the cell membranes are damaged, we see more autistic symptoms. When we can stop the damage to the cell membrane, those symptoms decrease. So your cell membrane governs a lot of your sensory processing, your articulation, your clarity, your cognitive skills, and your overall language. This is a communication center. Your cell membrane allows things in, and it gets rid of toxins. So we know that our kids have issues with their cell membrane. We know that many of them have problems within their mitochondria. This is the energy production factory in the body. Mitochondria create the currency that drives motor skills. So things like motor development, fine and gross motor skills, but also things like eye contact and communication, because these are the finest fine motor skills that we have. These are governed by mitochondrial function. So if you don't have a folate cycle that's working well and you can't methylate properly, you don't have enough glutathione, you're going to actually get damage to the cell membrane, and you're going to damage mitochondria. So most of the research in the medical aspects of autism have identified some problems with mitochondrial function. So if we can protect the mitochondria and start to heal the system, we're going to see improvement in overall skills. The way that I think about this currency when it comes to your child's language skills are just like, it's like you paying your bills. You have to have enough money to pay your bills. You have to have enough energy to move the muscles and to fuel the synapses. So we know that our kids who have a diagnosis, often they have too many little synapses and they don't have enough fuel. It's a fueling problem. If we can improve the fueling overall, we see overall gains in our kids. Now, I would definitely say in my 14 years of practice that the dietary intervention is the hardest for families. It seems surprising and even confusing to people that changing your child's diet could improve their development. So hopefully this will make sense. If 40 to 70% of children who have a diagnosis don't turn their pink wheel very effectively, they essentially can't take folic acid that's synthetic from things like grains and convert it into methylfolate, which we've just shown is essentially gold when it comes to development. So synthetic folic acid in the North American diet is around 5 milligrams a day, 5,000 micrograms. So that's fine if you can convert it, but if you can't, this cycle becomes clogged and it stops moving. The other ways that the folate cycle can slow down are through things like toxicity. Often we'll have families say, if my child's exposed to lead or mercury, do I have to put them on the diet? Well, yes, because these go hand in hand. Things like lead and mercury actually slow the cycle here. So it's even more important for a child who's been exposed to toxic metals to get the grains out of the diet. The faster the pink wheel turns, the faster the green wheel turns, the more glutathione, the better brain management we have of glutamate. So the grain-free diet pulls out not just gluten, but corn and rice, anything that has synthetic folic acid that's been fortified into it. By putting kids on this diet, sometimes it's called paleo or GAPS diet or SCD, they all function to improve the folate cycle. When your folic acid isn't converting, it basically clogs the brain. So let's imagine that these are the folate receptors. The folate receptors preferentially bind synthetic folic acid, which means that this is totally clogged with crappy folate until we replace it with our golden methylfolate. This will only happen if your child is 100% grain-free. The reason that we talk so much about the diet is that we estimate, based on the thousands of families that we've worked with, that this is 50% of your child's potential success. We see children's development dramatically improve. They feel better, they talk more, they learn faster. This cycle moving is a huge part of biomedical success. The other part that families find very difficult is using B12 injections. We're often working with really young kids, sometimes we're even working with toddlers and babies. B12 injections actually aren't about B12 at all. B12 status doesn't matter when it comes to improving methylation cycle. We use methyl B12. We use the methyl bound to B12 as a delivery system so that we can turn this green wheel faster. We know through research that if you inject with methyl B12, you'll improve how much glutathione there is in the brain. So these two cycles, when they're working properly, can boost your glutathione. Once your glutathione is higher, your child's developmental speed essentially speeds up, just like running on a treadmill. I think one of the biggest things that we see in our clinic is that, parents are, they're terrified that their kid's not going to be okay. They may have, not thought they were going to have a child on the spectrum, or maybe they had a child who was typical and then regressed. So parents they want an answer. They want something that can help their child be in less pain and have better digestion and sleep better and not hurt themselves and communicate more. And so they come to us and they ask, what can we do? And I always say to them, we want big results, so we need to do big things. We're not going to get big results if we don't do big treatments. So the diet is hard. It can be really hard, but once you are doing the diet and your child's feeling better and communicating more and learning faster, I don't think there's anything easier than you cooking to get your kid better. I think when it comes to the diet, it's not just that the diet's difficult. It's not just that the B12 is difficult or it's hard to get supplements in for kids. I really think that families are terrified it's not going to work. I think that sometimes the fear of hope is worse than the fear of failure. And so we say to families, listen, it may not work, but it's probably going to if you look at the percentages. It's 3 months of your life to find out, right? Take the grains out, get the B12 injections in, get some of the right supplements that are based on testing. And usually in 3 months, kids are on their way to getting better. And recovery isn't about not being on the spectrum. Recovery is about your brain getting better and feeling better. The exciting thing about all of this mounting medical research with respect to brain inflammation and digestive dysfunction and mitochondrial impairment is that if it's medical, it's treatable. And if it's treatable, it's reversible. And so the sooner you start that process, the more function your child is going to have and the better they're going to feel.
All right, so in that video, she talks about glutathione. Now, why is glutathione so important? Well, glutathione is the second most abundant molecule in your body, second only to water. Very important. And we know that kids or the persons, adults as well, on the autism spectrum, often they don't produce adequate levels of this molecule called glutathione. Why is that important to you? Well, if you think about what glutathione does, it is a master detoxifier which rids your body, detoxifies your body of something called oxidative stress. And we know that persons with autism, because they don't produce enough glutathione, often have high levels of oxidative stress. In fact, oxidative stress is a very important topic for all of us. If you look at the research, there's over 300,000 studies just on the subject of oxidative stress. It's been linked to over 200 different diseases like cancer, diabetes, Parkinson's, lupus, different mental health disorders such as schizophrenia, arthritis, and yes, autism and ADHD as well. So oxidative stress comes from everywhere. The food we eat, all of the preservatives and all of the artificial chemicals that go into our food to make it taste better and look better. Guys, that's not real food. And your body doesn't treat it as food, it treats it as toxins. Also, oxidative stress comes from the air we breathe, all the pollutants in the air. And did you know that over 85,000 chemicals have been introduced into our environment since the Industrial Revolution? That's a lot of chemicals. A study that was done by a group of scientists in America states that the average baby born in the US has over 287 toxic chemicals in their system at birth. 180 of them are known carcinogens. In other words, they cause cancer. So you can't tell me that a child being born today with all of these chemicals is not being negatively impacted by them. So oxidative stress, again, a lot of studies, and it's been linked to one of the disease health processes that it's been linked to is autism. Also, when you have high levels of autism, it leads to something called mitochondrial dysfunction. Mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, and if your brain cells have mitochondrial dysfunction, that means that the brain cells are not functioning as adequately as they should. Also leads to high levels of brain inflammation. So as I started looking at all of these biomarkers, again, we started looking at ways of addressing them. A good friend of ours, Dr. Melody Rodarte, invited us to start doing some looking up the research that was done by Dr. Joe McCord. Dr. Joe McCord is a world-renowned biochemist. He is the winner of the Elliott Crescent Award. He was the discoverer of the key enzyme superoxide dismutase, and just a phenomenal work that this guy has done. So over his years, he wanted to look at ways of reducing oxidative stress and increasing glutathione. Well, he discovered a formula and he patented that formula and he calls it Protandim. Protandim is being sold by a company called vantage. Now, when I did my research in PubMed to see if it was there, lo and behold, there's 28 peer-reviewed studies on the finished product of Protandim. Now, guys, that's unheard of for a natural product. You get research on the ingredients, but this is on the actual product. Let's see here. It's also been studied by universities from all around the world. For example, LSU in conjunction with the Skin Cancer Foundation, they studied it. The American Heart Association published a 26-page article in Circulation Magazine on the effects of Protandim. Children's Hospital of Colorado. Check this out. Our federal government, the National Institute of Health, they studied this one particular product for 10 years. Now, why in the world is our federal government studying something unless they're trying to figure out something big about this? At the end of the study, they concluded that Protandim was the only natural product clinically proven to work 100% of the time on 100% of mammals. It doesn't work on birds or reptiles or fish or anything like that. But if you're a mammal, humans are mammals. It also works on horses, dogs, cats, lions, tigers, bears, all mammals. 100% of the time. And so what what Protandim does is it activates certain a key gene in your body called the NRF2, which boosts glutathione by over 300% and reduces that nasty thing, oxidative stress, by 40% in 30 days and up to 70% in 120 days. So this video here explains how and why oxidative stress is so bad and how those enzymes work. All right, so the Protandim is an NRF2 activator. And as you can see, NRF2 is very beneficial for persons with autism. Protandim has been featured on ABC, NBC, CBS. It's been featured on the Dr. Phil show. Montel Williams takes Protandim, and he says that it's helped him with his multiple sclerosis. It's been featured all over the place. And so when you look at all of the studies on Protandim, you see that, for me anyways, it was a no-brainer. Now, in that video, Dr. Doherty also talks about folic acid, and we all know, now we know what folic acid is. Everybody knows about gluten. Everybody's talking about going gluten-free, but we know that persons with autism have issues with processing folic acid and gluten. Now, in the video, Dr. Doherty talks about using B12 or methylated B12 injections or shots. Yeah, well, the problem is that my son Patrick was not going to allow himself to get a shot every week or every couple of weeks. It wasn't going to happen. Most kids are not going to be very cooperative when it comes to that. So we started looking for a product that had methylated B vitamins in it. And we found one. Oh, by the way, methylated B vitamins are called methylcobalamin. So we found a product by the same company, LifeVantage, called Axio, which has methylated B vitamins. It also has quercetin and other brain-enhancing natural ingredients like rhodiola rosea and so forth. Now, something else that we want to talk about here is the gut-brain connection. If you go to any autism conference, they always talk about the gut-brain connection and how a lot of these kids have a very poor gut biome. So we wanted to address that. So we looked at LifeVantage at the recommendation of Dr. Rodarte, and we started looking at LifeVantage's probiotic and prebiotic. Now, most people know what a probiotic is. That's great. Most people don't really understand what a prebiotic is. Did you know that a prebiotic is actually more important than probiotic? The prebiotic is what feeds the probiotics. So if you have probiotics, but you're not giving them the right ingredients, then those probiotics are dying. So we started giving Patrick the prebiotic, probiotic, and his gut health got really much better, and so did his brain health. So what we did to help our son is we basically started addressing those biomarkers with Protandim, NRF2, to increase glutathione, lower oxidative stress, started giving him Axio in order to help him with the methylated B vitamins and the what I call liquid brain food. And then we also started giving him the prebiotic and probiotic in order to help him with his gut health. Again, I've said this before, this is not intended to treat, cure, or mitigate anything. Patrick is still Patrick, but my son went from being a special education student to now being in College Station studying kinesiology, and he's already started practicing with the Texas A&M judo team. So he has come a long, long way. And the only thing we did differently was add these products to it. These, we got so excited about it, we started introducing it to some of our patients, friends of ours that were coming to our clinic. And at our clinic, we do QEEG brain map studies. So we're able to measure the electrical activity of the brain. And so we started keeping track. Look at the difference here. Anytime you see red, yellow, oranges, that's all bad stuff. That's a lot of inflammatory and processes, as well as a lot of hyperactivity of these brain activities. Now look at this after 3 months. Beautiful, beautiful functioning brain. So how does this relate to or translate into the real world? Well, look at this young man. He was in special education for 8 years. Now, I want you to understand what I just said. Special ed, 8 years. He came to us. We explained to him the protocols. They followed them. The parents followed it to the letter. Look what happened 4 months later. He tested out of special education, became an AB student, only one B in Spanish, which I understand. And he is now at UTEP, studying mechanical engineering with 3.65 GPA. No more special education. no more accommodations or anything. He is a regular student with plans on joining the U.S. Space Force because he wants to design jet and rocket engines. So, guys, look, we decided that we were going to promote the LifeVantage products because of what we saw. We saw it with our kids, we saw it with our patients, and we just believe that, I hope you do too, that all kids deserve the best opportunity to be their most productive self. So, guys, that's all I have for you today. I hope this was beneficial. And I know I was talking fast, but I wanted to be respectful of your time and get all the information out to you. I encourage you to get back with the person who invited you to watch this webinar and ask them questions. If they don't know the answers, they'll find somebody who does. They'll probably find me, and I'll be more than happy to help you. All right. Thanks a lot, guys. God bless you. And remember, as I always like to say, there is a better way to live. Bye now.